What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today we've got some absolutely massive breaking news coming out of Dallas, and Cowboys fans, you might want to sit down for this one because we're talking about the possibility of the Cowboys losing not one, not two, but three star players. Yeah, three major names that could completely change the direction of this team, shake up the locker room, and alter the way this franchise looks going into the next season. So stay locked in, because we're going to walk through who these players are, what's really going on behind the scenes, what the reports are saying, and what this all means for the future of America's team. First off, let's set the stage. The Dallas Cowboys are under more pressure right now than they've been in a long time. We're talking about a franchise that's expected to compete for a Super Bowl every single year, a fan base that's beyond tired of early playoff exits, and a front office that's constantly in the spotlight, especially with Jerry Jones and Stephen Jones always talking about all in and commitment to winning. The problem is, when you look at what's actually happening on the roster and in contract negotiations, some of these moves, or the lack of moves, don't exactly scream all in. And that's where these three star players come in. Now, before we break down each name, understand this. When we say losing these players, it can mean a few things. It could be a potential trade, it could be a contract holdout, it could be free agency down the line, or it could be the team simply deciding not to extend or re-sign them. So we're not talking about small rotational guys. We're talking about players who are core pieces of this team, guys whose jerseys fans are wearing in the stands every Sunday, players that defensive coordinators and offensive coordinators have to prepare for all week long. Let's start with one of the biggest names, Dak Prescott, the face of the franchise, the starting quarterback, the guy who gets more attention, more criticism, and more spotlight than anyone else in Dallas. Reports have been flying around for months that the Cowboys and Dak are not close on a new long-term deal. He's playing on a massive contract right now, but the structure of that deal, the cap hit, and the way the numbers escalate have put the Cowboys in a tight spot. The clock is ticking. And if a new extension doesn't get done, the reality is that Dak could hit free agency or become a trade candidate sooner than a lot of fans want to admit. The situation is complicated. On one hand, Dak puts up regular season numbers. He has chemistry with his receivers, he's respected in the locker room, and the coaching staff trusts him to run the offense. On the other hand, the playoff results haven't matched those expectations. Every time the Cowboys fall short in January, the spotlight swings right back to Dak and to his contract. Is he worth a top-of-the-market extension? Do you commit even more years and guaranteed money? Or do you start thinking about a future beyond him at quarterback? That's the tension behind the scenes. You've got national insiders reporting that Dak and his camp are looking for a deal that reflects his value in a market where quarterbacks keep pushing the ceiling higher and higher. Meanwhile, the Cowboys front office is trying to balance that with the need to pay other stars, deal with the salary cap, and not lock themselves into a contract that might limit their flexibility for years. So as talks stall, as deadlines loom, the possibility grows that Dallas actually lets this thing go all the way to the wire. And if they do, and they can't tag him again, or don't want to commit that kind of cap space, the unthinkable suddenly becomes possible. Dak Prescott in another uniform. That's why he's the first star we have to mention when we talk about the Cowboys potentially losing a major piece. Now, let's move to the defensive side of the ball, because this one is huge. Micah Parsons. One of the most explosive, dominant defensive players in the entire league. A guy who can line up on the edge, rush the passer, drop into coverage, and basically wreck a game plan all by himself. Micah is that rare kind of player that every team dreams of building around. And because of that, his next contract is going to be enormous. We're talking about potential record-setting money for a defensive player. The question is, are the Cowboys going to step up and pay it? And are they going to do it early? Or are they going to drag this process out and create friction with one of their young superstars? Already, we've heard rumblings that Micah wants to be paid like one of the very best in the NFL, not just among linebackers, not just among edge rushers, but among defensive players, period. And based on his production, he has a strong case. Multiple double-digit sack seasons, constant pressure on the quarterback, game-changing plays, and a presence that offenses have to account for on every snap. Players like that don't come around often. Teams usually do whatever it takes to keep them. But again, this is Dallas, and the money situation is complicated. If the Cowboys hesitate, if they try to push this down the road, you start to risk creating a situation where Parsons feels underappreciated or disrespected. We've seen this league-wide. Star players skip voluntary workouts, they're limited in training camp, they make their frustration public on social media, and eventually, things can get ugly. You do not want that with your defensive cornerstone. But the reality is, if the Cowboys drag this out and can't align on what that number looks like, you open the door to trade rumors. You open the door to Micah looking around the league and thinking, what could I get somewhere else? And other teams, make no mistake, would line up for a chance to trade for him or pay him top dollar in free agency down the road. So while Micah is still under contract now, the long-term question hovers over everything. Are the Cowboys going to lock him in and commit, or are they going to let this relationship get to a dangerous place? The longer they wait, the louder the conversation gets about whether this team might actually lose a generational talent on defense because they couldn't get a deal done in time. That's the second star we're talking about, and it's a massive storyline. Now let's get to the third star player in this trio, and this one hits the wide receiver room, CeeDee Lamb. One of the most dynamic receivers in football, the clear number one option in this passing attack, and a player who's absolutely entering his prime. CeeDee has turned into exactly what Cowboys fans hoped for when he was drafted. A true WR1 who can line up all over the field, run every route, make contested catches, and change the momentum of a game with one play. If you look at his production, his targets, his yardage, his touchdowns, he's earned the right to look for a big-time payday. The wide receiver market has exploded recently. We've seen guys across the league sign massive extensions, huge guarantees, huge average annual values, and contracts that completely reshape teams' salary cap structures. CeeDee's camp knows this. They're watching every deal that gets signed and using that as leverage. From his perspective, it's simple. He's one of the top receivers in the game, he's producing at an elite level, and he wants his contract to reflect that. From the Cowboys' side, they know they can't just let a player like that walk. At the same time, they've got money tied up in other positions. They've got future deals to consider. And once again, they're trying to walk that line between paying their stars and keeping flexibility. But here's where it gets scary for Dallas fans. When you combine the Dak situation, the Micah situation, and the CeeDee situation, you start to see the bigger picture. This team could end up in a scenario where they're juggling three massive superstar-level contracts at the same time. And if they don't prioritize correctly, if they don't move quickly enough, they could risk losing one or more of these guys either in a trade, via free agency, or in a messy holdout situation that affects the chemistry of the locker room and the performance on the field. Imagine going into a season with questions around your starting quarterback's future, questions around your defensive superstar's happiness, and questions around whether your number one receiver is going to get the deal he wants. That is not the kind of noise you want swirling around your team when you're trying to win a championship. Now, let's talk a little bit about how each of these situations could actually play out. Starting with Dak. If the Cowboys don't get an extension done, you're looking at a couple of options. They could potentially let him play out the deal and risk losing him for nothing in free agency, or try to tag him again if the rules and cap situation allow it, But that would be insanely expensive and would absolutely handcuff what else they can do with the roster. The other option, if talks go nowhere, would be exploring a trade. And trading your franchise quarterback is not something any team does lightly. But we've seen star QBs moved before when contract talks break down or when teams decide to pivot in a different direction. If that ever happened in Dallas, it would be one of the biggest stories in the NFL, period. With Micah Parsons, the most likely scenario is a long and possibly tense negotiation that eventually ends with him getting a huge extension. But most likely doesn't mean guaranteed. If he starts feeling like the team isn't moving fast enough or respecting his value, he could sit out parts of the offseason program, maybe even miss some training camp time, and let the pressure build. If that continues and the two sides really dig in, that's when you hear the trade rumors. It doesn't mean the Cowboys want to trade him, but when a star player is unhappy and the money is huge, front offices at least have to listen when other general managers call. With CeeDee Lamb, again, the expectation around the league is that elite receivers get paid, especially when they're this central to the offense. But if he and the team are far apart on numbers, maybe guaranteed money, length of the contract, or structure, the same pattern can pop up. He could skip OTAs, maybe not show up for voluntary work, send some subtle or not so subtle messages on social media, and apply pressure that way. In extreme cases, star receivers have requested trades in the past when negotiations stall. Now, that doesn't mean CD is going to do that, but the history around the league shows you that it's on the list of possibilities. So what does all this mean for the Cowboys' future, and for you as a fan watching this unfold? It means that this front office is heading into one of the most critical windows we've seen in years. The decisions they make on these three stars are going to define this era of Cowboys football. If they somehow manage to lock in Dak, Micah, and CeeDee on deals that work for both sides, keep the core together, and still have enough room to build around them, you can say, okay, this team is truly all in. They're committing to their stars and building a real championship window. But if they mess this up, if they lose Dak and end up scrambling at quarterback, if they drag their feet with Micah and create a fracture on defense, if they don't take care of CeeDee and weaken the offense, then you're looking at a team that might be forced into a mini rebuild, or at least a serious retool sooner than expected. There's also the emotional side of this for fans. Think about how attached Cowboys Nation gets to these players. You buy the jerseys, you watch the interviews, you follow them on social media, and you ride with them through ups and downs. The idea that your QB1, your defensive terror, and your WR1 could all be in some kind of contract limbo at the same time is stressful. You're waking up checking your phone for alerts, seeing all the rumors, and wondering what's real and what's just noise. Every little quote from Jerry, every little post from the players, every insider report from the national media suddenly becomes a clue to the bigger puzzle. And in the middle of all this, the rest of the league is watching too. Other general managers are looking at Dallas and thinking, if they can't pay everyone, who might shake loose? Who might be available in a trade? Who might hit free agency? So even while the Cowboys are trying to figure out how to keep their core intact, there are 31 other teams ready to swoop in if any cracks appear. That's the nature of the NFL. It's a business, it's ruthless, and star players always have options when they reach a certain level of production and fame. Now, let's be clear. Nothing is official yet. None of these three players have been traded, cut, or walked in free agency at the time of this recording. But what we're seeing right now is the early warning signs, the building tension, and the very real possibility that the Cowboys could lose one or more of these star players if they don't handle these negotiations the right way. When insiders start talking, when cap numbers start climbing, when you hear phrases like far apart in negotiations or no significant progress, that's when you know the front office is running out of time to get ahead of the story. So, Cowboys fans, I want to hear from you. If you had to prioritize, which of these three stars would you absolutely refuse to lose? Are you ride or die with Dak at quarterback? Is Micah the one guy you'd say, pay him whatever he wants? Or is CD the offensive centerpiece you cannot afford to let go under any circumstances? Let me know in the comments. Rank them, Dak, Micah, CD, in terms of who you think the Cowboys must lock up first, second, and third. This is the kind of debate that really shows where fans' heads are at about the future of the team. And also, let's talk about the front office. Do you trust Jerry and Stephen Jones to get these deals done and keep this core together? Or are you starting to lose faith in the way they manage the cap, the way they handle stars, and the way they talk publicly versus what they actually do behind the scenes? Because if this team really is all in, as they like to say, then it's time to prove it with these contracts. Words are cheap. Moves matter. As we keep following this story, here's what you should watch for. Any new reports on contract talks with Dak, Micah, or CD. Any changes to the Cowboys' cap structure that might signal an upcoming move. And of course, any whispers of trade calls or other teams checking in on availability. Pay attention to what the players themselves say in interviews. Are they sounding confident, frustrated, non-committal? Are they skipping team activities? Are they sending messages online? All of that is part of the puzzle. We're going to stay on top of this situation and bring you updates as soon as they happen. This is one of those stories that could reshape the entire NFC, not just the Cowboys, because when stars move, the balance of power shifts. Imagine Micah Parsons on another contender's defense. Imagine CeeDee Lamb catching passes from another elite quarterback. Imagine the Cowboys rolling into a season with an unproven QB because they couldn't get things done with Dak. Those scenarios are real possibilities if this front office doesn't lock things in. For now, though, that's where things stand. Three-star players, three massive contracts on the horizon, and one franchise standing at a crossroads. Are the Cowboys about to secure their future? Or are they on the brink of losing the core that was supposed to bring a Lombardi trophy back to Dallas? Time will tell, but the pressure is absolutely on. If you're still watching, you're a real one. Do me a favor. Scroll down, hit that like button so this video gets in front of more Cowboys fans, subscribe if you haven't already, and turn on those notifications so you don't miss the next update. I'm going to be breaking down every new development in this story. Any new report, any contract update, any trade rumor, and bringing it straight to you. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Are the Cowboys losing these three stars? Will they find a way to keep them? Which one would hurt the most to see go? Let's get that conversation going. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.